All right, so let's say that you are doing a timed logic game section. Maybe it's test day. You've done the first three games and you're down to the fourth game when you only have 5 minutes remaining. What should you do in this scenario? I would recommend, first of all, read the paragraph, read the rules, and try to get a general sense of what's going on with the game. See if you can make any major inferences. Then do the orientation question, because that's going to be a gimme, I hope. Then you could do the local questions. And then finally, if you have time, which you probably won't, you would go on to the global questions. And you'll notice here that this is really not any different at all from my actual LSAT logic game strategy as a whole. Do the questions in the order that makes sense for you within a game. So if you never get to those inference questions or the global questions, if you never get to the rule substitution questions, that's fine. Those are the hardest questions anyway. Of course, if you made some major inference up front, then you might have wanted to tackle a global question sooner. But if you don't, that's okay too. You're knocking out the easiest questions first. Why are they easy? Well, the orientation question, that's just kind of like a main idea question in reading comp. It's a general warm-up question that is meant to acclimate you slowly. All you're doing for orientation questions is process of elimination, going rule by rule through all 5 answer choices. And then the local questions, those give you a jumping off point because they say if L's in 3 or whatever it might be, you can automatically, in most cases, draw a diagram and go from there. So overall, my recommendation, if you have 5 minutes left for the fourth logic game, is just proceed as you normally would. Don't panic and trust that you'll be able to knock out at least a few of the questions just using your basic structure, your basic approach that you have in general. Let's say that you're at the end of a timed logical reasoning section. You've got about 3 minutes remaining and you have 5 questions that you have not yet solved. And maybe you also have a few earlier ones that you marked off hoping to come back to. What do you do in this situation? There are a number of approaches you could take, but I'll give you what seems to make the most sense to me. The questions that you marked off already as being difficult, you already know that they're hard. Maybe you're down to 2 on those, and your odds of them are probably close to 50-50. So I would not use the remaining 5 minutes to go back to those questions in this particular circumstance. Instead, I would look at the remaining 5 questions in the section and think about which of those 5 are the easiest and use my remaining 3 minutes on those. If there's a lengthy parallel question or a principal application question or a question on philosophy or science, those are questions that I would find particularly difficult, and so I would not start with those. Instead, I would look towards whatever other questions might appear. Maybe a strengthen, a weaken, a necessary assumption, a question on politics, or some other topic that I do like, and I would focus on those questions. Maybe I would do only 2 or 3 of them. I'd get through them as quickly as I could, of course, but I would save the hardest ones for last. And the hardest ones in this case are the parallel reasoning, the principal application, the questions on more abstract topics, as well as the ones I marked off specifically because they were hard. Now, if I, on the other hand, finish the section with 3 to 5 minutes remaining, then I can go back to the questions I've marked off because I've already completed every single question in the section, or at least attempted every single question in the section. But if I haven't finished the section yet, I'm not going to go back to the ones I marked off. You have 5 minutes left. It's the last passage or even the last game. Obviously, our average amount of time allotted is 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So if that's the amount of time that you have, just 5 minutes, your odds obviously are not going to be that high. So you want to attack any general global questions for reading comp. So those would be main point, primary purpose, passage organization, best topic for the best title for the passage, author's tone, anything general in nature. Those are easier to knock out. And those are the sorts of things that you want to be knocking out anyway when you're reading the passage for the first time. That's what you want to walk away with. If you had 5 minutes left when you got to the last logic game, that's a very different story. In that case, you want to make your main diagram, answer any orientation questions, then answer any local questions because those give you a jumping off point. You simply have to draw the diagram specifically for those. There's no major inference that you need to have seen at the beginning. So that's my thoughts on that. If you had only 5 minutes left and you still had something like 10 hard logical reasoning questions remaining, then I would probably just focus on a few of those hard ones because they require the time. You might not be able to solve them in only 30 seconds per question. That doesn't strike me as the most reasonable course of action. So I'd be thinking about just cutting your losses and doing fewer rather than trying to attempt everything. That's a general theme, I guess, of my whole answer for this question is don't try to do an extraordinary amount of questions in a very short period of time because the harder questions have a greater deal of complexity and will actually require more of you than the easier questions that would appear earlier.